Hey guys, I'm Raquel. Welcome to my channel Out of the Past, where I talk about classic movies. And this is another episode of the Classic Movie Roundup, where I talk about 3 classic movies I watched, the film book I'm currently reading, and I follow that up with a wildcard segment. So if that sounds of interest to you, keep watching. The first movie I'm talking about today is the Christmas classic Remember the Night from 1940. Remember the Night stars Barbara Stanwyck as Lee Leander. She's a frequent shoplifter who has just been caught trying to pawn an expensive bracelet she swiped from a jewelry store. She's soon arrested and brought to the courthouse. District Attorney John Sargent, played by Fred McMurray, has been assigned to prosecute her. He's not looking forward to it because it's Christmas Eve and he was just on his way to spend the holiday with his family. John takes pity on Lee and arranges for a bondsman to post bail for her so she doesn't have to spend Christmas in jail. Now, these two are polar opposites. John is a straight-laced attorney, Lee is a jaded criminal. But they find something in common when it's revealed that they're both from Indiana. John and Lee go on a road trip with the intent of dropping off Lee to her family home before John arrives at his. Lee is received coldly by her cruel and unloving mother. John can't bring himself to leave her there and instead invites Lee to spend Christmas with his family. Things get complicated when John and Lee start falling in love, knowing that Lee still has to face jail time for her crimes. So Remember the Night. It's really earned the label of Christmas classic within the last decade or so, thanks a lot to Turner Classic Movies, who keeps it in their regular rotation of Christmas classics every year on the channel. In fact, if you go to their website, you can see a introduction by Robert Osborne from 2015 for the movie, and I highly recommend you watch that. I'll link it down below. And it's easy to see why this is a Christmas classic. It's an unassuming story. You have the storyline of like kindness and generosity and family and the whole theme of second chances. It's really heartwarming and inspiring. Although I'll have to say, when I first watched Remember the Night, I did not like it at all. It definitely improved on this new viewing for sure, but I still struggle with the first 30 minutes, especially the representation of Black characters really sours it for me. And I mean, the first 30 minutes are really a courtroom drama. There's a bit of sexism in it too. But if you move on to the last hour of the movie, that's when it becomes like a cozy Christmas love story. And it really benefits from that last hour. So even on the next viewing, I might just fast forward to the good part. This film, I think, on this viewing in particular, I noticed how it makes the case for nurture instead of nature, because in the story you see Barbara Stanwyck, her character grew up with this cold and hateful mother who was outspoken about her expectations of her daughter becoming a criminal. She just expected so little of her. So basically, the Barbara Stanwyck's character is set up for failure. And then in contrast, you have Fred McMurray's character, who comes from a loving family, who believes in him. I mean, there's also this scene where he is playing Swanee River and he's not doing a great job of it, but they're all looking on him so lovingly and supportively. And they instilled in him this belief that he could, if he puts his mind to it, he could do anything. And then he, eventually, studies and becomes a district attorney. So you see this family who's like warm and caring and supportive. And then Barbara Stanwyck's background is completely different. And because there's such a stark contrast in those families, when the story puts Barbara Stanwyck's character in the world of Fred McMurray's family, you can see her coming to realize that there are families who like love each other and are supportive, and you see her start to change too. And Barbara Stanwyck does a really great job with the facial expressions when she's starting to realize things. And they do have to throw some drama in there where, which I think is a shame, but it has to be a plot point to move the story along, where the mother character is like trying to convince Barbara Stanwyck to stay away from her son. But I don't think that would have happened in the world of the characters, but I think to move the plot along, it had to happen. Okay, some interesting facts about Remember the Night. This is a Paramount film directed by Mitchell Leeson. It was based on an original story by Preston Sturges. This was Preston Sturges in his screenwriting career right before he started to become a film director with The Great McGinty, which followed shortly after this. And according to Jeremy Arnold in this book here, Christmas in the Movies, which I've talked a few times on this channel about, Preston Sturges would frequently go on set and he got to know Barbara Stanwyck, and he was so impressed with her that he promised her that he'd write her a screwball comedy, and that eventually became The Lady Eve from 1941. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And he co-wrote that and directed it, and obviously she stars in it. You may have noticed in different listings of this movie, it's either Remember the Night from 1939 or 1940. And it's a little tricky because technically this came out December 31st, 1939. That was the big release, like the world premiere, the release. However, the extended release where the public got to see the movie wasn't until mid-January of 1940. So I'll call it 1940 because that's when the general public would have seen it, and December 31st is just so close to 1940. It might as well be 1940. The film at the time was really well received. There's a really great quote from Fred Nugent of the New York Times. I'll read it here. "It is a memorable film in title and in quality, blessed with an honest script, good direction, and sound performances. A drama stated in the simplest human terms of comedy and sentiment, tenderness and generosity, warm, pleasant, and unusually entertaining." Lots of adjectives there, and that's spot on. Back to the release date of this, and I had asked Jeremy Arnold of Christmas in the Movies about it because this is a movie that's very distinctly Christmas. There is a New Year's scene too, but why would it have been released to the general public mid-January? Wouldn't it have made sense to release it a little earlier? And what about other Christmas movies? You have like Miracle on 34th Street, Christmas in Connecticut, and those were released in the middle of summer, which seems strange for Christmas movies. So I asked Jeremy Arnold what was the case with this, and he said that watching movies about Christmas around Christmas time wasn't a thing until like the 1950s, where a lot of households had televisions and they were watching these old classics on TV and staying home, watching TV, celebrating Christmas. Christmas movies just became part of the Christmas tradition of celebration. So I thought that was really interesting because it just seems kind of silly to release them in the middle of summer or like way after Christmas. But if you think about it, these were just stories that just happened to take place in these times, but it didn't really matter because the tradition of watching Christmas movies at Christmas hadn't happened yet. So I thought that was interesting. Some other facts here. This is the first of 4 films that Barbara Stanwyck and Fred MacMurray starred in together. The most famous is Double Indemnity from 1944, which is the most film noir of film noirs, usually it's called. And they play off beautifully, both in Remember the Night and Double Indemnity. And they have this like on-screen chemistry that's really quite electric. It's just really fun to watch. And in Remember the Night, you have a bad girl transformed by a good guy. And then in Double Indemnity, you have a good guy transformed by a bad girl. And it just goes to show that they still had that chemistry, even though their characters and the storylines were just completely different. And I'll just quickly show on the screen this ad from Modern Screen, which says, "Bad girl, good guy, great picture." That was like the tagline for this ad, which I thought was great. And I thought I'd just point out that Beulah Bondi has a meaningful supporting role in this as Fred MacMurray's mother. I had mentioned her role earlier. And then Sterling Holloway. I love Sterling Holloway, and he has a really cute bit part as Fred MacMurray's brother. Remember the Night is available on Blu-ray and DVD, made on demand from Universal. It's also available to stream right now on the Criterion Channel as part of their A Barbara Stanwyck Christmas lineup, which is fun, and that's how I saw it. And also, as I said before, Turner Classic Movies shows it pretty much every year around the holidays, so you can watch it there as well. Okay, the second movie I'm talking about today is On Borrowed Time from 1939. On Borrowed Time follows the story of Julien, aka Gramps, played by Lionel Barrymore, and his grandson Pud, played by Bobs Watson, as they try to outsmart death. Cedric Hardwicke plays Mr. Brink, a personification of death who comes to take Pud's parents with him. Mr. Brink's job isn't done, and he's sticking around for a while. Pud's parents left him with a sizable inheritance, and his prudish and mean-spirited aunt Demetria, played by Eily Malion, has her eyes on the prize. She wants to adopt Pud to get access to those funds. But as long as Gramps and Granny Nellie, played by Beulah Bondi, are around, then Pud stays in their care. But Demetria has a plan. She just needs to convince the local authorities that Gramps is off his rocker and isn't of sane mind in order to care for the young Pud. It doesn't seem so hard to do when Gramps is exhibiting some erratic behavior, like talking to his magical apple tree. Yes, I said magical apple tree. Early on in the story, we learn that anyone who climbs that tree is stuck there until Gramps wills them down. And Gramps needs to buy some more time to help Pud, so when Mr. Brink comes to visit, up the tree he goes. On Borrowed Time is a bizarre film. You'd expect it to be like this sentimental story about a grandfather protecting his orphaned grandson, but it goes so much deeper than that, and it's so dark. It's this parable about destiny and death, and it tackles the subject of like the importance of death for ending suffering and for the continuation of mankind, and it's just really interesting. There's a lot to think about with this movie. And even though the subject matter itself is very heavy, it doesn't feel heavy-handed, at least to me. I didn't find it that way. I think it's because there's a lot of really heartwarming scenes, especially between Lionel Barrymore and Bobs Watson, who work off each other beautifully. That it really balances out kind of the darker subject matter. And I think Barrymore specifically is just so good at playing like the old curmudgeon. And here he's like an old curmudgeon with a heart of gold, you know. And you can really tell that he cares for his grandson. And Barrymore in this film is wheelchair bound, and he was quite ill at this point in his life, but he really championed for him to get this part because it was going to go to another actor. So I'm glad he did, because I think he did a great job in this. And there's with Bobs Watson, he was a child actor. He came from an entertainment family, had many siblings, and all of them were in the entertainment industry in some way. And there's nothing quite like watching Bobs Watson cry. Like, that was his trademark, especially at this point of his career. And you might know him from Boys Town, but he's really, I think this is a really great film for him because he's got a much bigger character, and he's really the only child in the movie. There's like a couple of other children in the background, but don't have any speaking roles. So it's just really, it's an interesting role for Bobs Watson. And there's something about Bobs Watson crying on screen. You just kind of want to reach in and give him a hug. This movie I first watched in 2015, and it had a really profound effect on me. That was the year I lost my grandfather in January, and then I lost my father and grandmother in August. So death had come to visit our family quite a lot in a short period of time. And that also happens in this movie. And I had watched this, and it just came to me at a time that it really spoke to me. And rewatching it, I just watched it with more attention on the story elements But the first time I watched it, it was much more an emotional reaction to the film. So that's one of the reasons I think rewatching these classic movies is great, because you want to have that experience first of really absorbing the performances and getting to know the world of the characters, and then you watch it again for the things that you might have missed. Some interesting facts about On Borrowed Time. This was an MGM film, and it was directed by Harold S. Bouquet, who also directed the Dr. Kildare movies, which then became Dr. Gillespie movies, which Lionel Barrymore starred in. The cast of On Borrowed Time has some of the most beloved characters of the day. Una Merkel has a very small role as the housemaid who's very close to the family. She's quite prominent in the publicity photos for the movie, but in the actual movie, her role is so tiny. So I really think that she was meant to be a more substantial character, and almost like she was going to be, her character was going to be groomed to be possibly a parent for Bob's Watson, who was orphaned in the story. But I think maybe some of her scenes were cut out. Other character actors include Beulah Bondi, who was also in Remember the Night. She plays Grandma Nellie, and she's made to look much older, and she has got a white wig and all the makeup. Nat Pendleton, if you're a classic movie fan, you know who Nat Pendleton is, and he plays a representative from the insane asylum. And if you're a fan of It's a Wonderful Life, the actor who plays Clarence, Henry Travers, is in this movie, and he plays Dr. Evans. He plays Lionel Barrymore's friend, and he's the one who kind of is like the non-believer who becomes a believer. It's a really interesting role. So On Borrowed Time was based on a few things. It's kind of complicated. It was based on a 1938 Broadway play, and that was an adaptation of a novel. And that novel was written by Lawrence Edward Watkin and won the National Book Award in 1937. So in the beginning of the movie adaptation of this, and it seems like this was a movie adaptation of the play, which was an adaptation of the novel. The beginning of the film has these opening lines that credit Chaucer's Canterbury Tales as the inspiration for the story. And some sources have said that this is partly based on the Pardoner's Tale in that book. And there's also references to a Greek fable about a pear tree and to the story of a saint. In the story, Lionel Barrymore says often, "Where the woodbine twineth," and that's a reference to the afterlife. And that is a reference to Septimus Winter's poem, "Gone Where the Woodbine Twineth," which is about a fallen soldier. And if you go into kind of like different, like either movies or stories, novels of the like the late, really the early 1900s, you see a lot of references to "Where the Woodbine Twineth," where now it's a little more obscure. So yeah, a lot of like literary references, which I really liked. And one fun thing about this is that the play, from what I understand, had a lot of like colorful language, and that had to be edited out so that this movie could be approved by the production code, because it would have been too raunchy for to be adapted to a movie. But something that they did keep was the word pismire. It's said by Bob's Watson and Lionel Barrymore. And in the storyline, Lionel Barrymore calls his wife Pismire, calls Aunt Demetria Pismire, and Bob's Watson, who will literally, like his character will literally just copy everything his grandfather does because he admires his grandfather so much, picks up the word. So I looked up pismire. It literally means urine and ant, but it's a precursor to the word pissant. And the word pissant is basically a vulgar slang for a contemptible person. So I thought that was interesting that they kind of threw that in there. On Borrowed Time is available on DVD made on demand from the Warner Archive collection. It's also available on video on demand from like various platforms. And it's shown on Turner Classic Movies. That's how I first watched it in 2015, and then that's how I watched it this time. So you can always check their schedule to see if they'll show it again. The next film I'm talking about today is Stormy Weather from 1943. Stormy Weather stars Bill Robinson as famed dancer Bill Williams. He's telling the story of his legendary 25-year career to a group of neighborhood children in a flashback sequence. The story begins in 1918 when Bill returns from his service at the end of World War I and meets performer Selena Rogers, played by Lena Horne, who becomes his love interest. Selena is a much more established performer and helps Bill get his start. While the film is loosely based on Bill Robinson's real life, the story is just a framework to showcase the 20 different music and dance numbers featured in the film. Highlights include Bill Robinson and Lena Horne singing and dancing to I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Ada Brown and Fats Waller performing That Ain't Right, Lena Horne singing the title song Stormy Weather, Jump and Jive performed by Cab Calloway and his orchestra, which is followed by a show-stopping dance performance by the Nicholas Brothers. I love Stormy Weather. This is an amazing showcase of talent. And the true highlights for me are Lena Horne, who's just absolutely glamorous and stunning, and she's got this like on-screen charisma that is just so like entrancing. And also Cab Calloway and his orchestra doing Jump and Jive. And then that Nicholas Brothers number, that's probably one of their most famous. And the way they do the splits going down the stairs, and then they slide down these two slides on the stairs while in a split, and they can pick themselves up in a split. I mean, just the level of talent and acrobatics that go into their dance routines was amazing. And those stairs, I believe, were built specifically for that dance sequence, which I think is amazing. Now, yes, this is a biopic on Bill Bojangles Robinson, but I sometimes forget he's even in this because there's so many other talented performers, and I love their sequences so much that they kind of overshadow him. So I think that's really interesting. So Cabin in the Sky, which is another all-black musical that came out, that one was from MGM. Stormy Weather was same year, and that is from 20th Century Fox. Now with Cabin in the Sky, you get more plot and fewer musical numbers. In Stormy Weather, you get more musical numbers and less plot. So even though they're kind of these two big all-black musicals from major movie studios with major black talent from the era, they are kind of vastly different in their approach for the musical format. Okay, some interesting facts about Stormy Weather, which I'll share from this book here, Lena Horne, Goddess Reclaimed by Donald Bogle. So Lena Horne was under contract with MGM, and they had loaned her out to 20th Century Fox to make this movie. She had a really hard time on the set because she did not get along with Bill Robinson. He was much older than her. She was 26, he was 64, and they were playing lovers, which already was a little bit odd. But he was also very difficult to work with. In the book, I learned that he had developed, especially in the later stages of his career, this reputation of being ill-mannered and temperamental. And she also had a difficult time with the director Andrew Stone, who she found kind of cold and remote. According to the book, Donald Bogle says she thought that he had no interest in helping her establish a screen career. Although Bogle had interviewed Andrew Stone many years later, and he was like, I don't understand why Lena Horne said that about me. So they had kind of differing accounts of that movie, of not getting along. She did struggle with the Stormy Weather number that she did. Apparently, the director could not get an emotional performance out of her because it is very much an emotional song. And they did numerous takes, and he just couldn't get any emotion out of her. So Cab Calloway came in and was like, leave it to me. And according to Donald Bogle, so basically Cab Calloway went over to Lena Horne, whispered 2 words in her ear, and she then delivered like the most amazing performance that was used in the movie. That was much more emotional. He says that I believe that like she had like tears in her eyes, and she was already really like sad, and it just kind of contributed really well to the performance. And those 2 words are still kind of a mystery, but some think that he said Ethel Waters to her, because this was Ethel Waters' song, and in this kind of space, she was in competition. Lena Horne was in competition with both Ethel Waters and Dorothy Dandridge. So knowing that Ethel Waters could do this performance kind of like maybe motivated her to do a better performance, or maybe it just shook her up knowing that she's competing with somebody who's very well established in her career. So we don't know, but I think that's kind of interesting. Okay, Stormy Weather is available to rent on video on demand. It's also shown quite often on Turner Classic Movies, and you can watch it there. That's how I watched it recently. Because it's a Fox movie, though, the physical media release has been kind of, hard to find. There was a DVD at one point, and resellers have it available on sale, but you have to pay quite a lot to get it. So it's not currently in print on physical media, but you can watch it on TCM or rent it on demand. Okay, for this week's book, I'm talking about Lena Horne, Goddess Reclaimed by Donald Bogle, which I just finished, and this is a fabulous book. One thing that I really like about Donald Bogle's work is that he really gets at the heart of the subject, and I felt while reading this book on Lena Horne that I really came to know her as a person and as a performer. He really goes into detail about what motivates Lena Horne, what her triumphs were, what her frustrations were, the circumstances of her life and her work environment, and how that led to different paths she took. He builds really this portrait of a personality that's like a gateway into their life. And I love when a good biography captures the essence of a person through the writing and isn't just like a long list of facts. And I think that's what Donald Bogle does really well with this book in particular. And this book tackles a lot of subjects. I mean, all of the chapters are themed, but it goes in chronological order of her life. And the topics discussed include, her upbringing, and then her start as a performer in the Cotton Club, her first movie, Duke is Tops, her time as an MGM contract star, her romances, her friendships, her social circle was really important to her. Her time entertaining the troops during World War II, that's a chapter in here that was really interesting. Her activism and her politics, which were really core to her beliefs and got her in trouble as well. It also talks about how much the civil rights movement had an effect on her, which I thought was interesting. It also touches upon her career on the nightclub circuit, on television, and on Broadway. And then it goes into like also her later films as well. And the key takeaway for readers will be learning about Lena Horne as a Black performer in Hollywood and beyond, the struggles she faced being a Black performer, and also her like pure ambition, like how her drive led her to all the successes she had. She was incredibly outspoken about racial prejudice amongst her fellow Black performers, and that really made her stand out. So some interesting facts from the book. When she arrived in Hollywood, she ruffled a lot of feathers. The existing colony of Black actors in Hollywood kind of felt threatened because MGM had contracted her, and she was really going to be a different kind of performer. She was going to have different kinds of roles. and the existing colony of black actors were making a really good living playing these, maids and all of these kind of like also stereotypical characters. I mean, it wasn't great, but it was steady work, and they thought that Lena Horne's entrance into the Hollywood colony was going to shake that up, which it did. So they were right to worry about it, but it did it in a good way. And also, Los Angeles at the time was incredibly segregated. So when she moved into a predominantly white neighborhood, there was this huge pushback. There was petitions and protests. Even like Humphrey Bogart had to stand up for her when some protesters came to because he was like one of her neighbors, to protest on his lawn. And I just thought that was really interesting. She came in and she really shook things up. And one thing that Donald Bogle discusses is the fact that Hollywood respected success, and Lena Horne was success. She was the epitome of success. So just her presence and her work in Hollywood really was revolutionizing things. And also Hollywood, embraced her, but also kept her at arm's length as well, because there was still, it was hard for them to put her in a leading role with a leading man, because the leading man might be white and there anti-miscegenation laws, and they didn't want to have a mixed race relationship on screen like that, which precluded her from having a lot of roles, including the role of Julien Showboat, which for her was one of the great disappointments of her career, not being able to get that, which I thought was interesting. But she was incredibly defiant during her time in Hollywood, and that made a huge difference. Okay, I had a couple thoughts on the book that I wanted to share. Donald Bogle also wrote 2 biographies, one called Heat Wave, The Life and Career of Ethel Waters, which is over 600 pages long. And then this one right here, Dorothy Dandridge, a biography, which I read last year and absolutely loved it. It was recently re-released. And this, depending on the format and which edition you get, the length will differ, but this one is over 700 pages. Whereas the Lena Horne book is much different. Those are standard biographies that go really into depth. This is more of a coffee table style book that does go into depth, but is much shorter. It's about 250 pages of reading pages, not necessarily including the back matter, like the index and bibliography and stuff like that. The publisher, though, said that this is the first book to provide any Black performer of this era the type of glamorous illustrated treatment and in-depth analysis that has been usually lavished on other types of movie stars. So I thought that was interesting that this is supposed to stand out. I wonder, had this been written as one of these books, like a standard, longer, more in-depth biography, would it have been different? And would this make more sense because Lena Horne herself was just so glamorous that the presentation just makes sense for her and a good representation of her career? It's just something I thought about. I didn't really have necessarily, have any criticism about it, but I was just thinking, could that have been a standard biography? And I think it's interesting too that Donald Bogle has written about the 3 big Black female performers of the era. So you got Ethel Waters, Dorothy Dandridge, and Lena Horne, who were all competing with each other for parts in movies because there weren't that many to go around and there weren't as many opportunities. So they were all kind of competing with each other and they were all in that same space together. So the fact that he's tackled all 3 is really interesting. And if you want to read more of Donald Bogle's books, I do recommend the Dorothy Dandridge book, and then also this one, Bright Boulevard's Bold Dreams, as well as Hollywood Black, which is also from TCM and Running Press, like the Lena Horne book is. And just one more thing about the Lena Horne book. the publisher says that there's a lot of never before seen photographs. There are quite a lot of photographs in here. I would have liked to have known which ones were actually never before seen. I'd have to look again in the back matter to see if there's any mention of that, but it doesn't seem like a lot of them are film stills. The captions are not great. The placement throughout the book is fine, but the captions are not great. I would have liked to have seen better captions and maybe like a little star, a little notification like, oh, this is a never before seen photograph. It's not really done in book publishing. I have book publishing experience. I've never actually seen that, but I thought it might be cool if even if in like the back matter could be listed as this is a never before seen photograph, because then you will kind of more appreciate it, and it'll add more value knowing, wow, that movie, that still or that photograph has never been published before. And now for this week's wildcard segment. From December 14th to the 17th, Julien's is teaming up again with Turner Classic Movies for a movie memorabilia auction. On December 14th and 15th, the theme is robots, wizards, heroes, and aliens. On December 16th, it's the Big Lebowski, the complete storyboards auction. And of particular interest to classic movie fans will be the auction held on December 17th, Glamour, Grace, and Greatness, Classic Hollywood Auction. This auction in particular has almost 400 lots with memorabilia from Hollywood studios and from various estates and collections. There are items that belong to Humphrey Bogart, Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn, Greta Garbo, Lucille Ball, Gloria Swanson, and many more. And more interest to people who want to have something from the royal family, including a lot of items from Princess Diana. While I can't go through all of the lots, I will share the ones that piqued my interest and that I would want to bid on. Lot number 723, Humphrey Bogart's gold and sapphire cufflinks, estimate $1,000 to $2,000. Lot 760, Audrey Hepburn's yellow Givenchy coat as worn in Charade, estimate $20,000 to $40,000. Lot 782, Gloria Swanson's black sleeveless gown as worn in Sunset Boulevard, estimate $10,000 to $20,000. Lot number 819, Ingrid Bergman signed 1942 Casablanca photo, estimate $500 to $700. Lot 890, Margaret O'Brien's blue pinafore dress as worn in Meet Me in St. Louis, estimate is $4,000 to $6,000. Lot number 960, Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert sign MGM Studio Luncheon Menu. Estimate $600 to $800, but the current bid is already at the top of the estimate, so it'll go for much more. And lot number 974, James Dean signed Rebel Without a Cause photograph. What's interesting about this one is that it might be one of the last things Dean autographed before he died. The estimate is $1,000 to $2,000, but could go for much higher. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed my video. Please give it a like, leave a comment below, and subscribe. It really helps me out. And just wanted to let you know I'm going on a little bit of a hiatus so I can enjoy the holidays with my family, but I'll be back soon with more videos. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.